All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. In a first-time event on this channel, I am doing a full band interview, and I could not be happier to do it with this particular band in question. It's my great honor to welcome Gaylene, Al, Carolyn, Diane, and Peter from Bag People. Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello. Good evening. Nice to be here.
It's really nice to have you all. I know we did a little bit of time zone juggling to make this work, so I really appreciate everybody signing on and having the chat that's going to come. For those who are new to Bag People, it was a band initially formed in Chicago, later became a New York band during the early 80s. The band were contemporaries with bands like Sonic Youth and SWANS will certainly come up a little bit later in conversation as well. The band unfortunately split up without properly releasing music around 1984. Fortunately, all these years later, just in the last few weeks, there's been the first official release of Bag People Music, a compilation of recordings from 1983, released on vinyl on the Great Drag City label. So there's been a lot of recent activity. We may have a special guest coming on. So let me kind of start with still a present day focused question. How does it feel for all of you to, in 2025, hold a piece of Bag People vinyl with these recordings from 1983? It must be a bit mind-blowing, I would imagine.
Yes, surreal, very surreal, and it's just crazy. I can't. I continually try to wrap my mind around it, and it just feels like so random and crazy. And I feel like finally, some reason we're in alignment. There's this musical alignment that happens in the universe. Neither you're on it or you're not, and we're finally on it. So I'm happy about that.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Has a bit of magic in my perspective. It's just like it's pretty cool. Yeah.
After 40 years, I've had no contact with anybody in the band
Who
for
are you anyway?
years, so it is very mind-blowing for me. It's been nice.
And it's especially weird for me because I feel like what's happening this year, the band that I'm playing in currently got invited to play punk rock bowling, that's a mind blowing thing too. That's super weird too. So I feel like this shit's happening this year that's mind blowing. So I hope it doesn't go away. It keeps blowing my mind.
Fantastic. Um, Carolyn, if I'm correct, this whole thing kind of started through the dreaded social media, right? That's how these connections were sort of reimagined and recreated to make this thing possible.
With Pete, yeah, because Al had been trying to find Pete for a long time to try to get these tapes that Pete had. Um, and I think, once in a while looked for Pete, on Facebook or whatever, because that's the only social media I'm on. And then Al brought it up again. I said, all right, let me see if I can find him. And then he was there for, I don't know, Pete, if you hadn't been or if I
Yeah,
hadn't.
yeah,
Oh,
I was
and you just
fairly newly on. Yeah.
okay. And yeah, so then I saw him, and then we connected and started, chatting through that, and then just kind of, after a while just said, "Hey, Al's looking for those tapes if you have them." And then I said, can Al call you?" And just connected them, and then Al took, because they're both on the East Coast, so
Excellent. So the vinyl has 12 tracks on it, and these are comprised of demo recordings, live stuff, rehearsal, things along those lines. Now, of the 12 tracks we have here, are there other recordings that were sort of discovered during this process that, um, for whatever reason, didn't make the vinyl, or are these really the ones that survived all this time?
No, there's a lot of other songs on those tapes, and there's actually still another tape that we cannot find that has some of our favorite songs, like I'm Just a Mastodon on the Road to Hell, baby. That's that's missing.
That's a great, great song because Diane, she screams in his gut, rope. No, no. So awesome.
I like Gumby and Pokey Took a Ride Downtown. That's one of
That,
my
that's
favorites.
on that tape as well, right? Yeah, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
there's still
Lumpy.
probably on the tapes.
Lumpy, yeah.
Yeah, on the tapes there's what, like another at least 20 songs? Is that right, Al?
Yep, I think we could put another two albums together
Yeah.
comfortably, still being sonically okay. You know, we have some recordings too of some live shows that are just you know, not worth it. They're too bad. But as far as having listenable material, I think we got about two albums worth still.
Do you really think we have that many?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have all of the CBGB's concert, right?
Yeah, yeah. A couple of songs. Yeah, exactly. We have that. We have remember. So what Drag City asked us to do is to sort of pick our faves, kind of, and then we had meetings and we made our list of songs, and then it got whittled down a little more into the 12 that we ended up picking for the record. Is what happened for this. So there is stuff in the kitty.
Well, one thing I really love about this collection is, you know, sonically, it certainly does feel of its time in a lot of ways, but it's not like we're listening to a garbled, you know, handheld live recording, for example. There's a real sonic strength to this material. Um, how much of that was just what survived on those tapes, and how much of it was sort of using the current technology to sort of boost up certain things that, you know, maybe were sort of deteriorating over time or things like that?
Well,
Um,
Al did a lot of work on it.
yeah, I
Okay.
did mostly. So the stuff. I mean, it's, you know, these are, you know, 40-year-old cassette tapes. Basically, a lot of the stuff is from 40-year-old cassette tapes. So, but those cassettes hold up extremely well over time. I think, you know, they don't lose a lot unless you play them a million times, but these weren't played a million times, so they still had some integrity. And plus the sound of, like, a lot of these were recorded on a boombox at a rehearsal space. So that coincides, the way the sound of it is it's very cool for the way the band sounded. Like, we're all very happy with sort of that overall sound combination of things, as far as being representative of what we think our sound is, right? So
Very garagey.
yeah, and so uh, you know, so as far as, like, how much work I put into it, I mean, I did spend quite a bit of time, but a lot of it is just EQ stuff, and sort of trying to just you know, trying to isolate things and bring them up, whatever needed to be brought up and stuff like that. And that was most of the work. And I did that in house here, and then obviously the mastering dude Carl Seff in Chicago, you know, did a couple of passes on it to try and clean it up as much as he could, or what he thought was to clean it up. We didn't mind the dirt, so it's okay for us, you know.
So the actual, I mean, I guess I never even remember talking about this. So the actual physical condition of those tapes was still pretty good. It didn't have a lot of wow and flutter on it or anything like that.
Well, Pete didn't keep it at the bottom of a bird cage, so he kept him in a box somewhere. So I think it was okay. Yeah, I mean, that's when you know, because as soon as I got him, I drove up to Shirley, Mass, and Worcester, actually, and got him from Pete over some Coney Island hot dogs, I do believe.
Right.
And and so, but I brought them back and immediately digitized them, just because I wanted to make sure that those, you know, that whatever is the quality of the tape will be sort of frozen in digital time. And then listening to them, you know, there's stuff that you can just, you know, you can help it along and whatever. But most of the stuff's EQ, man. So it's like, you know, it's just fiddling around to try and pop some stuff up. And there you go. And and that so luckily those that's as far as those the tapes that Pete had. We also had we also have the single, which is which the representation of the single on the record on the album, sorry, is actually is a re-recording of the actual single that I put through this amplifier back here as a preamp, and then just to get the integrity of that, and because unfortunately that single, the copies of it that I have here, they were really in pretty bad shape. So, but yeah, they weren't the highest quality recording, pressings, let's say. So over time, they've developed quite the warps, and as we all have, and that was sort of a little trick, and then I ended up splicing a couple of passes because it wouldn't make through a pass and stuff like that, so I kind of recreated it, but because unfortunately we don't have the master tape that thing that Carolyn brought to the pressing plant. Unfortunately, we don't have that 1/4 inch, which would have been a nice way to transfer it. So we didn't have that. So, and then a couple of the other songs we got from I brought it to my friend Larry Seven because we have the actual master recording, master 1/4 inch, and he put it, and he's got this, he's like an analog genius, and he's got all kinds of gear in his little museum apartment on 2nd Street between A and B, and so he made the recording for. We recorded it, and that's where I digitized it, just directly off of his beautiful machine, and so that's got a bunch of the integrity of that is really very there as far as the recording. So, and that's from the recording that we did at High Five Studio and on Park Avenue South in '83. And we have a song or two that we didn't get put on the Bag People album. So we have that in the kitty as well as some other stuff. So there is different quality stuff that we still have. I think that's pretty much the ones that ended up. And the CB's one needed a lot of. I think the CB's recording needed the most work as far as trying to make it presentable without cringing,
Was that CB's from the board?
Yeah, it's a CB board thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The CB show. My favorite moment from that CB show was when the guy came. Remember before he played, Carolyn? You guys, or Gaylene, do you remember when he came in? He walked into the dressing room in the back there, behind the stage. He's like, "Yeah, you guys, all right. This is it was an audition. It was a fucking audition night, right? So it was a big thing." But he's like, "All right, I got some advice for you guys. I see you wearing jackets. So my advice to you, take your jacket off, put the guitars on, then you put the jacket on over the guitars, because when you're on stage and you're playing, you're going to get a little hot. You're going to want to take your jacket off. So this way you can just take your jacket off without taking your instrument off." I don't even have
it. That's funny. I remember that.
I remember that quite vividly. And all of us were looking at ourselves with dropped jaws going like, what the fuck? It was like, it was hilarious.
So a typical night of CBGB. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. That way. My favorite place to play.
Yeah.
I ended up working there and then doing the little record store, serving bagels and coffee at the record store next door that they had.
Holy crap, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I used to fight with Hilly. Yeah, I had he wanted me to work to be a doorman for the hardcore show on Sunday and regulate the freaking skinheads. I'm like, they're not going to listen to me.
So you're gonna be the bouncer for the hardcore matinee?
Yeah, he wanted me to do, and I thought it was absurd. And I argued with him, and he says, "Well, then don't do it, and then you're fired." I looked at him so like, "You bastard." Okay, I quit. Yeah, it went down like that.
You can't fire me. I quit.
That's right. You can't quit. You're fired.
Yeah, and yeah. But CB's was I did I was an extra in a couple movies there too. I have yet to see my face in any of them, but in Outrageous Fortune and there was another one. What was the other one with Bette Midler? Yeah, she was looking at me like, what are you doing here?" And I looked at her like, "You're Bette Midler. Wow, I'm standing next to Bette Midler." And oh, it was that Woody Allen movie. Oh, Hannah and her sisters. Yeah, there was
They were in CBGBs?
it was just a short clip with the punkers at CB's. Yep. And so Connie, who worked the front, she was also a she did casting for this company, and whenever there was a punk role, she'd always call me. And so that was kind of cool. You know,
Yeah, for sure.
I did another one at where was that? The Love Kills one. Where was that? Well, where was that? I can't remember where it was now. I'll think of it when I'm not trying to think of it. Yeah, but I stood outside waiting in the freezing ass cold to get in that one, and I was standing next to Courtney Love, and I didn't even know her at the time or know who she was, and I thought that dumb. She's kind of dumb because she's freezing her ass off in these like fishnets, and I was all proud of myself, thinking how proud I was of myself for wearing long johns under my pants and being warm. I was like, yeah, I have it together. But she's all over that Love Kills movie. You see a lot of clips of her.
That's probably why I've never watched it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let me rewind things a little bit to the sort of roots of what became Bag People. From what I understand, it really kind of began with Carolyn, you and Diane in high school, circa 77 out in Chicago. The two of you meet and kind of fall into the same line as far as musical taste, things along those lines. Do I have that story right? That's how that came to.
Yeah, yeah. We went to high school together. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
And you eventually decide to do a band. That leads you to meet Gaylene. And I know at some point the three of you decide to give it a go out in Los Angeles. Uh,
Yes, and a bass player named April Hughes. Yes, and we actually went out there with a drummer from the Chicago area too. And I think her name was Marilyn. I don't think we ever decided if that was correct when we were trying to recall this. But yeah, we went out there and we were going to do the all-girl band thing. But when we got there, we were kind of up against sort of bands like the Bangles, and we didn't sound anything like that. We were much more hard rock, had a much harder sound, and it wasn't really accepted. You know, we weren't exactly accepted, our sound. And it was also a lot of, there was a couple of different, if I can recall, a couple of different managers or people wanting to be managers that were trying to influence us in wearing certain outfits and that, and we were just like, get the heck out of here with that. And I'm being very polite in how I'm saying that right now. So that's how that went.
We
Yeah.
actually did a movie interview at the Whiskey Go Go to audition for a movie. Remember
Yeah,
that?
it was a combination of that movie Little Foxes and then I think Mama We're All Crazy Now or something about like the whole girl band kind of runaways thing kind of thing. And
Yeah. So then they didn't they wanted us at one point, but then they decided to go with Joan Jett and Michael J. Fox, and they made that one movie about the same kind of dialogue, but it was yeah. What was the name of that movie? And now I don't remember that
I just
name.
said We're All Crazy Now
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
Little
That's it. That's
Foxes.
it.
It was
Yep.
a combo of those two. But
Yeah.
then but things we never really had a drummer for that long. I think we had a few different runs and kind of blew up and then we all kind of scattered for the most part and made our way back to Chicago kind of thing. And then
Yeah.
Gaylene was in Da
Right.
for a number of years. Yeah.
I did want to mention that one of the great bands of that era from Chicago, Dark Rooms, is one of my favorite records from that time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that record. Yeah, and Da was really it was a single and an EP, right? That was what was released during that band's run.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
just a single and the EP. Time Will Be Kind, and that the single. I don't remember what the single was called, but the EP was Time Will Be Kind.
yeah, yeah. The single was Dark Rooms. That was the
Yeah, it
and
was that was the name of it. That's right.
and it was, for your time, 81, 82. Da, interestingly enough, were pretty proactive in doing music videos because there are videos on YouTube of the band, which was kind of rare in those days. You didn't really see, an indie band do promotional videos and their actual full real promo videos. And there's also a documentary called You Weren't There, which chronicles some of the earlier days of Chicago, features Da in it. The viewer, I'd recommend checking out the Da music that's available. It's great stuff. Um, Too short of a discography, in my opinion, but I love the fact that that music is still out there in some form. Um, so you had done Da. The three of you again make your way to Chicago. What kind of leads the three of you back together to start what became Bag People?
Well, I think I'm gonna pick up here because uh I had played with DNA at Touch, this club, and I was like blown away. They like blew me away. Like my mind was blown at the kind of music they were doing. This random spontaneous noise thing with just I was like, "Oh my God, I have to do this kind of music. I need to do this kind of music." And
Just to intersplice here, I was at that show, Gaylene, and so was my friend Larry Seven, who I spoke about earlier. We were both at that show. We didn't know each other, and plus, I didn't know Gaylene either. And there was only there was a very sparse crowd there, so it was
There were 4 people there.
just a little over that, yeah.
and yeah, so and then I thought I wanted to create a noise band so bad. I just needed it. I needed to do it because in Da, it's just like we had to play the same parts over and over, the same everything. And I was getting to the point where I needed to grow out of myself. And I really was itching to expand out and play different things. And every time I would try to play something different in the song, Lorna would turn around and give me this look like, this dirty look. And I was just so like, oh God, I need to be free kind of thing. So I basically left Da. And there's been some regret about that through the years. But anyway, I contacted Carolyn and Diane. I was like, let's do this band. I have this idea. Let's do this band. Let's call it Bag People. And they were so down, and and everybody was into it. And then Al came to audition for the band and played Da songs, and I was like, wow, how cool is that? Everybody thought it was really cool, and I you guys might have different stories about how it took place, but in my memory, I this is how I'm remembering it, but I could
Yeah,
be
you
wrong.
guys remember much more than I do. I really don't remember any of
Yeah,
that
because
part.
we did have a different bass player before Al. We had a different drummer before Pete. So
They were, and I
And
used to,
it was your basement, huh, Diane?
yeah.
yes,
So I
yes.
used to go. I left my first band and then I was looking for a band to play in. All the bands I'd see in Chicago, there was only one band I wanted to join, and that was Bag People. But they already had a bass player, so I was much to my chagrin. So I kept on seeing them and hoping that one day they would need a bass player. And then I answered.
Really? We played out before you joined
Yeah,
the
yeah.
band?
Yes.
Oh
See, I don't
God.
remember that at all, but
Otherwise,
okay.
Neither.
otherwise I wouldn't have been. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what you sounded like and wanted to join you.
Right.
No, no. Oh
I
God,
I
that's
I
so.
I believe you. I just don't
Is
remember.
it? Didn't you tell me in Chicago that what's his name auditioned for us?
So what happened was I answered the ad.
That what was his name? That guy that
Steve
produced
Albini.
Nirvana?
Albini.
Albini.
Yeah, so he and I were down there for waiting to audition, and he went first. And yeah,
Where's down there?
Yeah, I don't know.
Diane's
Diane's basement?
Diane's basement.
All right.
But
it
actually,
wasn't down there.
they did
Fine.
not audition in the basement. They auditioned in my living room. It was in the living room, if you remember. You guys were in the living room.
All
The
right.
bass
Well,
players were.
your
Yes.
your living room looked like a basement. Let me tell you
No,
that.
because I specifically remember Albini walking in when he had that belt on with all the freaky boxes all over it, and I was just kind of looking at him like, oh my God, what is he going to do? You know, and that was yeah, it was just, anyway. So,
Well, let me pause for a minute because we
yeah.
have a special guest in the waiting room. I'm gonna let him in, join the party, and we'll pick it up from there. So give me just one
Okay.
second.
Okay.
Jordan?
A drum roll? Should we do a drum roll? Pete, you want to do a drum roll? There you go.
That
Hey.
sucked.
Let me grab some video. There we go. How are you?
Hi,
Good.
Joel.
How are you?
Hey.
Excellent. Hey, how are you,
Hi.
Diane,
Hi.
Gaylene,
Thanks.
Carolyn?
Hi.
Yeah.
Jordan.
Uh,
Jordan.
Homie.
Al, you're coming up as Al Key, which is excellent because I don't know, it makes you sound kind of Polynesian or like you have a drinking problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a little too many myself. You know what I'm saying?
It could be both.
Wonderful. Well, Jordan, thank you for joining us. We
Of
were
course.
talking about how this particular lineup came together, but since you're here, Al reached out to me and said, let's talk to Jordan because from what Al said, you were pretty instrumental in making the Drag City compilation a reality. So let me ask you first to kind of introduce yourself. I know you've been in some great musical projects as well, and then we'll get into how you sort of enter the picture here with Bag People.
Clearly, you have a deep record collection, Joel, because the musical projects I've been involved with are A, not particularly noteworthy, and B, very obscure. But I'm impressed that you'd even know that.
Oh, come on, I know Alger Hiss.
Oh, yeah. So for in the 90s and aughts, I was in a band called Alger Hiss here in New York City. And then in the 2000s, kind of in between a couple of different Alger Hiss lineups, I was in a band called Lee Miller in Finland with two members of a band called Circle. And I've played in a couple of other projects as well. I was a fill-in guitar player for a Japanese band called Ibo Ibo, who were kind of a noise rock band from the 80s, and they toured the States and had a fill-in drummer who didn't know the song, so my role was to basically cue him. And I've played with Jonas Mekas, who had the Anthology Film Archives backing him up. Pete Simonelli, who is a poet in a band called Enablers. Just a handful of other people, one-offs. Guitar player on a Toiling Midgets record just for one song as a guest, kind of like an old legendary San Francisco band.
Sure.
I was a music journalist for a really, really long time. There are fewer places to write nowadays, so I'm not really doing a ton of that. And that's me. I mostly drink wine and travel and work and hang out in New York.
Fantastic.
That's cool.
Well, first of all, there is an episode on this channel with Craig Gray from Toiling Midgets.
I've seen it. Yeah. And you have another one with another gent, actually, probably the first really reissued record that I worked on. You've got Victor from Rat at Radar. I helped oversee the CD reissue of that came out like 15 years ago of their first album.
Yeah,
Oh, I
wonderful.
didn't know you were involved with that reissue. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think I just have like a thank you or something. But yeah, there was a label in Finland, and I think I had mentioned that I'd been in a band over there, and it was run by it's still run actually by a guy named Jussi Lehtisalo, who has a band called Circle or Circle, as you'd call it over there, and he had a label, and been over there a bunch and we became fast friends. And he was just kind of like, Jordan, you have very good taste. Can you please find me some good stuff to reissue? He's a huge guy with a very deep voice. And that was like the first thing that sprung to mind back then. But it was I mean, like John Myers and Sonda, they really know what they're doing. So it was more just kind of putting everyone's head together and writing a little blurb and letting them take it from there.
Mm, fantastic. So, walk me through your involvement with the Drag City release for Bag People.
Yeah, it goes well before Drag City. I mean, I was just a fan. I was a big fan of Cabbages and Kings, which was Al, Carolyn, and Diane's band Post Bag People. I was buying those records in the very late 80s and early 90s. Saw them live once and they were incredible at CBGB's when I was like still a teenager. Um, Kind of maybe discovered that through enjoying some Swans records, but not necessarily enjoying what Swans was doing at the very end of the 80s. So I was like, oh, this guy, it's the ex bass player. Oh my God, this is like so much better than that Love Will Tear Us Apart cover, that kind of stuff. Was really impressed with Cabbages. And, I'd heard mutterings about this previous band and there being this single that you'll never find it. Nobody has it, but maybe it wasn't even for sale. And I had a friend who played bass and I think sometimes guitar in Glenn Branca's ensemble, a guy named Dave Reed. He actually played as a fill-in drummer for Alger Hiss once. And I remember talking to him about this record. And, Carolyn, I think, does not remember this, but I don't remember what symphony it was. I met you for 5 seconds through, there's no reason you should remember this, to be honest.
Yeah, I can't remember the beginning of the band, so yeah, that's
I, I met you for 5 seconds. Maybe it was at the end of Symphony 8 and 10, or maybe it was at the end of whatever the symphony was that was performed in the anchorage of, was it the Manhattan Bridge?
Oh yeah, that was
Brooklyn Bridge, Anchorage.
yeah, that was
Oh,
11, I think, wasn't it? Or 10, maybe it was 10.
I think
I
no,
don't
I think you're right. It was after. I mean, I was at 10 at the kitchen, but Dave introduced us really, really quickly, and that was that. And I asked him, I was like, do you think there's any way in hell that, Carolyn still has any of those singles? And he's like, I don't know, but here's her contact info. I don't remember if I called you or emailed you or what, but you were living in Chicago and you very graciously sent me one.
Oh,
And
I did. That's
yeah,
good.
it has no actual sleeve, but I have your
Right.
your penmanship on like the white, just paper sleeve as well with like the song titles and some kind of message. You had a bunch of these at the time. And I remember being pretty blown away by it and just playing it a lot and making a mental note of how good it was. And I had met Al a bunch, but I didn't really know him. Alger Hiss played with a couple of his post Cabbages bands. We played with Anne and we played with eventually later Neva, shared stages. And, we'd kind of met at bars and stuff, but we didn't really know each other. And then he had some years later ended up playing with a friend of mine, and I was at his apartment. I was like, "Hey, man, that Bag People single, that thing is really fucking amazing. It's a shame that most people don't even know what it is or haven't heard it or like is there any more of that stuff?" And I don't remember what your reaction. I think maybe you looked around and you had told me that you're like, well, the a lot of that stuff we recorded all of our songs on a boombox and in our rehearsal spaces, and the drummer split and took the tapes with him. And I might have a couple of songs, but I haven't heard that stuff. And this might have been like 2010 or something. At the time, it was like, I don't know, what was it? I'm bad at math. 25 years, 30 years, something like that. I don't know. Am I getting this right, Al?
25 years would be the correct math, but yeah, something like that. The reason I remember you really saying, "Hey man, have you found any of the Bag People material?" was because of your friend in Finland who had a label who was looking for early '80s bands. That was
Oh,
kind of does that ring a bell for you?
yes,
Okay,
probably. Yeah, back
that's
then I was
that's
still working with Ectro, which
yeah,
was UC's label. And like
yeah.
we had like a Toiling Midgets retrospective that I put together of unreleased songs. There was a band, like a lost sort of Yugoslav post-punk band called Sexa, who made one album but had a really long history, and they had all of this unreleased material. Japanese kind of no-wave punk band from '78 called Gasaneta that we put out on LP. A bunch of stuff like that. And probably when I was formulating all that, yeah, Bag People was kind of near the top of my list based on just the strength, and like, not that obscurity is really a legit criteria for good music, but it's kind of this sexy story that you have this 7-inch that nobody could even really buy at the time. It was for pals of yours or like a jukebox or something like that. So I bugged you about it periodically, I'd say for years, and you and I became better friends and got to know each other a little bit more. And then just kind of out of the blue, um, I'm thinking maybe about a year and a half ago now, and I remember this clear as day. You sent me an email, and I was on an island called Santa Maria in the Azores, on vacation, just like going on, really long, like 8-hour hikes, and just kind of hanging out. And you got this email. I got this email basically saying like, "Hey, we found Peter Elwyn, and we've got the tapes, and they're in one every Peter Elwyn and the tapes are in one piece, doing great. In fact, like I'm going to fetch these and go up to New England soon." And yeah, before I think you had played me Blessed Ignorance, which came out on like a magazine compilation, but it had this like, I don't know if it was an editor or a DJ. It had some shitty, like at the outro of the song, which is
Yeah.
instrumental. Somebody pops in and starts talking and being like, "You're listening to Bang Zoom Magazine #3." And I'm like, ah,
Bunny
you know, we,
Basement. That was
we're
Bunny
like,
Basement. Yeah.
it was really, really cool to finally hear that without the spoken interjection. And you had all this material, and it was great. The thing was, I wasn't really working with Ectro at that time. UC's label, it still exists, but he had wound it down a little bit more. So a couple of years prior, I had worked on, it was kind of the surviving members of the band were really reclusive, but a band called No Trend, who you guys might remember from the early '80s. They were really kind of
They had
infamous.
an amazing, amazing song that was played all the time on FMU or NU, NYU or whatever that would pop on every now and then. That's just like, you're like, who the frick is this band? They're awesome. So from the '80s, I remember that stuff. Yeah.
They were very noisy and very antagonistic when they started out. They were pretty critical of like the whole DC straight edge scene, and they played very slow and very, very dissonantly. But then when they kind of built up a fan base for that, they then made a second record. Lydia Lunch, I think, appears on half of it, that is like these kind of just really gut-wrenching, almost disgusting sounding, heartbroken ballads that are still all out of tune and really freaky. And then for their third record, they turned themselves into like a dissonant kind of Las Vegas lounge act. They hired a full horn section. They were basically trying to piss off whatever small fan base they would gain with each successive record. And the singer Jeff is a really reclusive guy. He lives on the eastern shore of Maryland, and he thinks that all this stuff is just this stuff from his past, that he's not embarrassed by it. He doesn't hate it, but he really doesn't want to have anything to do with it. But I had done an interview. I had tracked down the surviving members of the band. I'd done an interview for New York Press. It was in the early aughts. It was like 2000. It was around the time of 9/11, I remember. And it was kind of like the final No Trend album had been rejected by Touch and Go for being too weird. And I got a copy of it in the mail, thought it was pretty cool, always loved that band for a long time. And this is like early internet days. So I was like, using the phone book and stuff to track down the surviving members of No Church and write this big article about them. So many years
Could you
later,
say that? Could you say those two words again? Phone book?
yeah,
Wow, that's awesome. Love that. Phone book.
excellent things to like, find children
You might
and
have to put a definition on that because people won't know what the hell you're talking about.
yeah, you can put like a little one with like a footnote or something like that, or maybe you can hold one up, Joel. I think you probably,
I have one in my kitchen
There
actually.
you go.
they're so much thinner now than they used to be. Like you
Yeah.
able to kill
Well,
vermin.
those are the neighborhood ones. Those are the neighborhood ones because they used to show those too. The neighborhood
They
ones were the thin
have them?
ones.
They
Huh?
actually still produce phone books now? I don't
Not
know.
that, not that I've seen in the last 15 years.
I
No.
was gonna say I had one 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
last
I
time.
think that's when they ended it.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
so they're done.
I
So
was excavating, looking for some files today in my kitchen where I keep all my archives, and I came across a phone book, and I'm like, I remember, I was talking to Al just before we started recording. Last time I saw Al was about 18 years ago because I was working on some book projects, and that was the days, man. You'd have to like actually call people on the phone and try to track people down organically. It's not like today you can just send a Zoom link, which is awesome. But to your point, I miss the hunt. We'd have to actually like hunt somebody down, and it was like, I found him, I found him so and so, and I know where they are now. So there's magic in connecting the dots of bands that have been gone for a while. So I absolutely appreciate that point.
yeah, I mean, the No Trend Project was a serious hunt. I mean, I had known that Jeff had used to work at Joe's Record Paradise in a small town in Maryland. I called the shop and talked to the owner, who just like handed me off to like one of the ex-guitar players who was like a mailman. And he's like, well, Jeff doesn't really take phone calls, but I'll call Jeff. And anyway, yeah, No Trend everyone is either dead or reclusive, except for one of the mid-period guitar players, a guy named Buck Parr, worked for ABC, was a broadcast journalist and producer, and he was really the only person who gave a shit about this band's legacy. They had no master tapes, all the photos had been thrown away, but Buck, the guitar player, and I had this crazy idea to basically do a box set reissue of all their early material. The first 7-inch EP, the first 12-inch EP, and the first album. And then also to write, he had me write like a 50-page, well, it's mostly photos, but it's 50 pages long. We co-wrote a book about the band because like the early material, they had there were fake names on all those early records. Nobody really knew who these guys were or what their deal was. Anyway, there were a bunch of labels in consideration, but that eventually ended up coming out on Drag City. And I think I never really knew those guys, but we had poked around. I'd reviewed a bunch of Drag City records when I was a music journalist. I was writing for a zine in Chicago for a second in the early 80s. So I was definitely more than aware of them, and they were perhaps, maybe I'm being arrogant, at least dimly aware of me. So we pitched this no trend box to Drag City, and they said yes, and they were into doing this box with all this stuff in it. Uh, it came out really well. It sold pretty fast, and when when Al found Peter and realized that the tapes were okay, uh, you know, no disrespect to UC, his thing is kind of wound down. And also, okay, this label is in Finland. Like, Drag City is like, this is the label that, Pavement used to be on and Royal Trucks and stuff. And the No Trend thing was cool. And I think those guys don't think that I suck. So, like, why not? Let me ask them. And the Chicago connection, I think, also really helped. For me, a really interesting thing about Bag People is you had this like kind of noisy post-punk like effigies, naked ray gun, big black breaking circus thing that was pretty well documented in Chicago. You maybe had kind of a more English leaning post-punk thing with, a band like Da. But Bag People, and you had some no wave stuff, but it didn't really rock per se. You had like a band like End Result or something like that. To me, Bag People was kind of that bridge to here to New York City, and kind of this interesting tie-in that really it doesn't exist with any other Chicago band, and it doesn't really sound like any Chicago band at all. And I think that, it appealed to Drag City, that I think this was this link to history in their own backyard that maybe they were not aware of. It probably helped that the single had become sort of collectible and whispered about a little bit online. And it just seemed like, well, I'm not expecting them to necessarily say yes, but like, hell yeah, let's give this a shot. And I emailed them and heard back from them. I had sent them a link to the single on YouTube, and they're like, send us some more. So I got in touch with Al. He sent me a handful more songs, and I sent those in. And they were like, yeah, this is pretty good. And I'm like, well, here's Al's email address. Take it away, dude. And that's kind of, I think, how everybody here got connected to that. Correct me or interject if I'm wrong about any of this.
I just want to say thank you.
Oh my God, Gaylene, thank you. It's really funny. I don't think she works for the label anymore, but the outgoing publicist, she was leaving the label at the time, but the one who had worked on the No Trend thing, I remember being totally freaked out because she's like, "Oh, yeah, that woman Gaylene who'd been in Da is in." She's like, "I have that Bloodsister record." And I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, and this is like a youngish woman who worked at Drag City, and she's a Bloodsister fan, which I thought was like pretty.
What?
Yeah.
She's actually got a Bloodsister album? That's crazy.
Yeah, I
That's
don't even
so
have one.
cool.
It was I was totally blown away. I mean, you're more than welcome. Thanks for like doing this, incredible thing that I'm glad is not just, you know, there's a lot of lost music out there. I mean, like a lot of bands didn't even make records.
Yeah.
Great bands that never got to make a record. Right? So
Well,
many. Wow, that's
and
amazing. You the man.
Thank you.
Now, I know you're all together for this, but weren't you recently together as a whole for a record release party just in the last couple of weeks? Do I have that right?
Yeah.
And was that in Chicago?
Yes, at the Rainbow Club in Chicago. And it was just we were trying to we were going to try to have it at Drag City, but they were having an art show there at the time, and they weren't sure if they wanted to have a record release party in the room while there was a curated art show in there. So Al just out of the blue called the Rainbow Club and got Skylar on the phone, right, Al? It was Skylar?
Well, let me preface this because I also before that I called a place that we had played before, which is right across from Wrigley Field, which I got arrested at the last time we played there.
I got arrested with you.
Yeah, and so,
That Cubby Bear.
that the Cubby Bear. That's where I called first. I called before that to see if they can do that, and then actually a friend here in New York said, "Oh yeah, because I know he used to go to the Rainbow a bunch too. He knew the name of the owner of Rainbow, so that's where I got it because I called for looking for the owner of Rainbow at the club, and then Skylar was on the phone. Skylar's a guy who works there, and he was the liaison between us and performing there. It turned out, but talking to him, he was like, "Oh yeah, cool." So he was very good in trying to convey the message to the owner. And then I talked to the owner, and she's like, "Yeah, I remember you. Yeah, you can do it. No problem." So it's good.
So this was the first time the five of you had been physically together since 84?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely because we haven't seen Pete since then. I mean, I think Gaylene and I have been in the same room. I mean, I went to the Da reunion show, whenever that was, Gaylene, 10, 15
2012.
years ago. Yeah. And Alan, Diane and I are pretty much in touch a lot, so, and Diane lives by me, we're the two that live almost in the same area.
So, Pete, what was it like for you to walk in that room and see everyone again after so long?
Well, I had been seeing them on Zoom, and we had many meetings on Zoom,
Many.
figuring out what to.
Not that. Let's get this straight. It's not that many. There was maybe a handful at tops. It wasn't that like it was an annoying thing every freaking 3 days. We had, I think, about 4 meetings, 5 tops.
We had more than that.
I don't think so. I think it was like.
None
Anyway,
of them
Pete-
were necessarily annoying.
I didn't say they were annoying. I just said they were many.
Yeah.
Semantics. Okay, semantics notwithstanding. Please, Pete, sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
I nothing more to say. I mean, 40 years, I don't know anybody from 40 years ago, really. And I mean, I started playing music recently with a group of with a couple of guys who are like half my age. They're in their 30s, and because they want to, rock out really, and pretty much so do I still. So it's nice to be able to go back to people that I knew back when I was, early starting my career in all this, starting my whatever it was.
Your journey. Your
I
journey.
wasn't careering
Your
back then.
musical
really.
journey, yes.
Your musical journey.
A journey, okay.
Well, obviously one great thing about having this conversation 40 years after the fact is you're all still here to have it.
That's right.
Yeah. We didn't die. It's amazing.
Um, you know, the question that is being begged to ask here, you have this reissue, you're all thankfully upright. Is there any chance that we're going to see something new down the line, whether it's a show or maybe a new recording now that you're all back in touch again?
Al's thinking about playing in New York by this summer, right, Al?
Yeah, I'm gonna see if we can do a record release version, New York, a New York version of the record release soiree that we did in Chicago. Maybe a little different, but still, it would be good as we were, from both cities essentially. That it would make sense to have a record release in both cities, and so I'm gonna try and put that together for the coming month, sometime in the short near future.
Great.
And then, yeah, who knows after that? I mean, we've actually in our short, like 1.5 rehearsals that we had to get prepared for the Chicago show, record release event, we already wrote a new song. Diane came in and said, "Hey, I got some lyrics. Let's write a song." We're like, "Of course, no problem."
Yeah, and
we actually wrote 2.
well, not really, but kind of.
1.5.
And then I just sent them all an email. Was that yesterday morning or the morning of our beat? I said, warning, I just wrote some more lyrics. So
We're gonna have to come up with another one, next time we get together for a rehearsal.
for rehearsal, yeah.
I would love to play. I would love to go over the pond. Get over the pond. But I don't know. We'd have to wait to see if there's a big market for us there,
Yeah,
I
well,
love playing Europe.
yeah, the idea would be let the record grow some legs, hopefully, see what happens.
Right.
And
See what happens.
yeah, I mean, yeah. So, and plus, with our lives, everyone has life. And so it's about trying to see how that would work, down the road, if there was something like that, about how we would make that work. And that's nothing to be talked about now because that's all down the road stuff. So we'll see what happens. But, there's things like that. So.
Very cool.
But just as far as like, the beauty of what did happen, a couple of weeks ago in Chicago for me was just like such a breath of fresh air again to get these people that I loved music with 40 years ago. I've never forgotten those moments of of creation that we had together. That was very important for me musically and in my life as well. And then
it's our roots.
yeah, and then to have that happen again, it gives you more juice in life to do things. So
exactly, it fueled me.
yeah, plus the beauty, the magic of the possibility. I mean, you can't write this shit because no one would believe it. Sort of like, sort of like in, this, but that's very prevalent today about things that you'd never think would happen are actually part of the reality. And that's sort of what's happened to us as well. And but to play again and to have so much fun playing and to kick some ass, which I think we did on that stage. So it was nice to see about how everyone is still very much involved and sort of cohesive. And so the whatever made us stick together back in the day, I think that's still apparently there. So that
I love to travel.
Yeah.
Well, what another thing that makes you all very unique is as a band, as a collective, you pushed up spokes and traveled to New York. The five of you, completely relocated to New York.
Yeah.
During the early 80s, which New York in 2025 is not the New York back then. What led to that decision to leave Chicago and head
It
out?
wasn't mine. I wanted to go to LA.
Noise, New York. Noise, New York.
Well, I had lived in New York before we did Bad People, right? I don't even see. I can't
Facilitated
remember
that whole
this shit.
move.
Yeah, I went to New York and I was like still, trying to find and I played in a band and stuff like that. Played and then I came back to Chicago. And then
She's a wandering lass.
yeah. And so and after we played a while, I was like, there's nowhere we can go here. I think we should go to New York kind of thing. And I don't know why everyone said okay. So
Well, Carolyn, didn't you?
Well, that's where DNA was from.
I don't know either.
That's where the band DNA was from, and there was that whole Noise New York thing going on. I was like, if we want to do this music, we got to be in New York.
Oh, great! So it was your fault.
I thought, Carolyn, that you had met Michael Baseman and he encouraged us to go there.
Well, that could be. I mean, I did because Michael Baseman, who's the guy who put out the Cabbages LPs eventually, the first couple, and I was working with his wife at an ad agency, and she became a good friend of mine, and so that's how we hooked up. And they're the ones who did that fanzine, Bang Zoom, the cassette tape.
Wait a minute, Carolyn, you're saying that Bunny worked at Benton and Bowles?
Yeah.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, I worked there too for a very short period of time. But
did you? Yeah, for like a week.
Hey, you got me a job there. That was my first New York job.
Yeah.
Because I recall when we first got to New York that Michael was trying to help us find gigs there and things when we first got there.
How did we get to? Sorry.
No, I was saying that he encouraged us to go to New York, and that's one of the reasons that we went out there. That we went out that way because he was saying that our music would fit better out there, or something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was probably like a combination of all those things. Yeah.
Yeah, it was unanimous.
Well, well, I wanted to go to LA, and you guys said no. We're not going back to fucking LA, dude. Because we're going to New York.
That conversation.
I definitely think musically speaking, New York was the better choice because as much as I love Chicago, Chicago had its own thing. Sonically speaking, when I listened to the Drag City compilation, you're very much in line with what was happening at the time. And I'm looking at the flyers that accompany the recording that are on the sleeve. You're playing with Sonic Youth, Swans, Rat it was that time in New York, and I think the Bag People were absolutely perfect as an addition to that. I am wondering though, because I've had a lot of those people on the channel already, Victor being one of them. My friend Drew and I just did an epic podcast with Thurston a couple months back. Um, New York was legendary for being what it was in the early 80s. And, I think about Black Sabbath. You look at photographs of Birmingham from the late 60s, and of course, Birmingham's going to spit out Black Sabbath. I mean, there's no question about it. So in New York, when you're all kind of playing around, how much did just living in the city in those days inspire the sound, you think? And maybe just the sonic aesthetic that a lot of these bands seem to have common threads with. You're all quite different, but at the same time, you can tell if it's a band from the early 80s in New York playing that scene because there's a grittiness to it I don't think you would have found elsewhere in the country. And what do you think of my impression? Am I on the money with that? Did New York have a weight to what you guys were doing in those days?
Most definitely. I mean, it was a tough place. I mean, the early 80s in New York was, where we lived too. I mean, we all kind of lived in different places again, but the Lower East Side was pretty rough.
I have
And
a very vivid memory
Bed-Stuy,
of that.
well,
Bed-Stuy.
we lived in Bed-Stuy also, where there that was just crazy that we did that. Every one of
Yeah.
us got mugged.
No, I didn't get mugged.
You what?
I didn't get mugged because I was carrying a 12-inch open knife in a bag, opened, but I made it look like my lunch, and I wore a hoodie.
You made a knife
I
look
used to
like your
carry
lunch?
around a bag with an open knife in it that lady gave me that I worked with in Beverly Hills, and I thought, fucking anybody comes near me, I'm sticking them. I used to think that in my mind. Yeah, is that fucking crazy?
Yes.
Fucking Al got held up with a knife talking to his mom. He had to tell his mom, hold on, ma. Put the phone down and, had to tell the guy, what did you do, Al? Did you have to give him your wallet?
First of all, I would never use the word inspired when I'm trying to think about those days. I don't think it was inspirational, but
No, it was an emotional catastrophe that made you feel raw and you felt the edges of life and surviving and fucking the
yeah.
mayhem of fucking New York, which was fucking crazy. When I got my finger cut off, dude, I went around and saw a man rolled under a fucking train track and said, God.
Carolyn,
I saw gunshot wounds. I saw a chest that was opened with a fucking lady dead right in the middle of the hospital room because they were so crowded. They had to put me in a fucking like a little curtain room. It wasn't a room; it was a curtain room, and I was like, wow, like the horrors of New York was the fucking Wild West.
I hope you get this
It
recording
was
from.
it was so out of control. Like I walked out my door one day and I saw a gang of men yelling with clubs and bats in their hand, chasing this single guy that's running for his fucking life because he knows if these guys catch him, they're gonna club him to death. And then there was a fucking car. It was dismantled within hours. I watched this car.
Yeah, that would have been mine.
And then across the street, there's a cop standing right there doing nothing with his back. I was like, and there was people going, "Oh, I got the C&D. I got the C&D." And I was like, "What the hell is that C&D shit? What are they selling?" Carolyn's like, "Coke and dope, stupid." And I was like, "Damn, out loud like that? They do that out loud with the cop right across the street?" That I was always like, "Oh, I could not believe that." I couldn't, like in Chicago. Hell no, that would never happen in Chicago. New York was a fucking Wild West, and I know for a fact that influenced my being a loud, out of control. Fuck you to the sound man. I'm gonna play loud no matter what the fuck you tell me, and I still do that to this day.
We need to applaud.
Influence would be the proper word, not inspire. I think is the all I was.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah.
I think in a dude, when I was in fucking pain, I was inspired to write some of the best lyrics of my life. So I
Gaylene, how
differ with you, bro.
Okay, not to take away from any of the horror of New York, because I'm not going to say that that was not there, but I lived in some pretty shitty neighborhoods in Chicago as well.
That's right. That's what I agree with that. I don't know where you were doing, Gaylene, but Chicago was equally as freaking twisted in certain ways.
So I just
not as
needed to
dangerous,
throw
but
that
a
in there.
different twist.
There was a lot of drugs in Chicago. There was a lot of robbery in Chicago. I had freaking paper napkins stole out of my car in Chicago. That was the only thing in the car was paper napkins, and they stole them. So it's just I'm just saying. And when we were living in Los Angeles, there was also an
that's pretty
enormous
crappy.
amount of drugs happening, an enormous amount of craziness happening. It was just, and it was a different type of craziness because coming from the Chicago area was just, even though we might have been crazy, we were a lot more grounded in our craziness than the people in LA were. So yeah, I think that inspiration or influenced by all of that was part of life. I don't think it was necessarily just a particular geographic location. I think it was part of overall life picture.
Well,
I
yeah,
can
because
speak for myself. Yes.
well, yeah, because we are pretty poor, so we didn't get to live in the best areas of any town. So
I wasn't poor. I worked at the Sears Tower and I stole money.
Jesus.
So, Gaylene, my question to you is, what finger did you cut off? Because I haven't seen that. What are you talking about? You got a finger cut off? Like,
That's the one. That's the one that looks crooked.
okay, so
oh,
still,
That's
Yeah.
this one. It's crooked forever.
Well, I've heard crazy New York stories on this channel, but no one's had an appendage severed before.
yeah.
Conversation.
So it was reattached?
I told the hospital, I said, if you don't sew it back on, see that window over there? I'm gonna jump out of it. You better sew my finger back the fuck on.
Whoa.
So 3 days I was there. I wasn't really gonna jump out the window, but I just wanted to, have them do it right.
Well, you jumped out of a window right now because now you're outside. It seems so.
I'm thirsty and I'm trying to find something to drink. See, I live in the desert. It's really nice right now. I could feel the spring.
I wish I did. I live in New Hampshire. We had snow yesterday still.
Yeah.
Oh, it's still really cold. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. Even down here in New York, it's pretty brutal. So tomorrow's going to be 60, but yeah.
Yeah. We'll get there eventually, man. But it's been a long walk to spring this year for sure.
So Pete's not far from you then, right, Pete? You're in Massachusetts.
I'm halfway between Joel and Al, probably. I'm in Fitchburg area of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Worcester.
Yeah. I know the area well. I used to do some publishing work for a client in Massachusetts, so I would bounce around all over the state really, but I know that area very, very well.
Yeah.
I know the band eventually comes to a halt in 84, if I have that correct.
Yeah, it was August of '84 or July, late July, early August. We played a show. It was our last show. We played at the 930 Club in D.C. We were opening for the first Bad Seeds tour, so we were opening for the Bad Seeds.
Nick Cave.
Nick Cave, Bad Seeds, right? Yeah, and so the promoter in D.C. liked us a lot, so that's how we got the gig for that. He's like, "Hey, you guys want to open?" We're like, "Yeah, cool." So that was our last show.
Why was that ultimately the last show? Why was it time to see what else
Well,
was going on?
we never technically broke up. I mean, we never said, "Oh, that's it for us." It's just like, so what happened was on the way back, my van, the van that we used for travel and stuff, the engine seized, so we got stuck in Jersey, South Jersey, and came back, and we, didn't have the money to fix the van.
You didn't tell him why we didn't have the money, Al.
What happened?
Al, you didn't tell him why we didn't have no money, Al.
Well, if you're talking about the $80 the broken mirror cost in the dressing room, Gaylene, I
It was more. It was more than that, wasn't it?
no, no, our fee, we were going to get $100 for the show, and then what happened was, so, you know, and I shouldn't say this because I'm friends with some of these people now, but you know, these guys. So we're down in the dressing room. We did a sound check. We're down there. You know, we're having, you know, just chit chatting. You know, we're just the band, and then we see this group of like Euro hipsters come in all in black leather and stuff like that, and we're like, yeah, I don't know about that. So we had a boombox, played some ZZ Top, and started wrestling. You know, fake wrestling. We used to do this fake wrestling for fun, and so we're throwing each other around. Those guys were like, "What the hell's going on?" And then I picked up a chair and fake gonna hit someone. They ducked. I hit the wall, and then all of a sudden you heard this big like explosion happen, and I'm like, "Uh-oh, what just freaking happened?" The door next to the wall that I hit opens. Mick Harvey comes out. He's white as a ghost, and he walks straight out the dressing room. I'm like, "What the hell just happened?" I went around, and what happened was on the other side of the wall that I hit with the chair was a full-length mirror that he was just like looking in the mirror, putting some makeup on, and the mirror exploded in his face.
That was his fucking karmic dude.
So anyway, so when after the show we played, you know, the promoter's like, "Hey man, it was a great show. We love you guys, you know, but unfortunately there was a little incident in the dressing room. You're gonna have to pay for that." And so instead of $100, we got $20.
Mm.
That was Pete. Were you still in the band then?
No.
You weren't there either, because both Pete and I had already.
That was Teddy. I think it was Teddy.
Yes, that was
From
Ted.
Prong.
Yeah.
Teddy.
That was Ted.
So, but it was a great show. It was really good. We played really well, and but that was so we never did another show after that because of you know, poverty and people started to do other things. Gaylene, I think you joined. You were joining Bloodsister or something already or something.
Yeah, Scab.
Yeah,
turned
and
into
then
Bloodsister.
Diane was going to art school.
I'm gonna have to lock myself in the bathroom. The dogs are barking at someone in the alley.
Oh.
Oh, I thought that's why you didn't continue playing because you locked yourself in the bathroom.
After Bag People broke up or whatever, however you want to put it, I was in the blues band with Phil and Hazel from Health Hen.
Yeah.
And we played at the Pinta de Blues bar, so we were called the Pinta de Blues Band. And Bob Trock, our late friend Bob Trock, was the drummer. Yep. Yes.
How cool is that? That must have been way cool.
Oh, yeah. It was definitely very, very interesting. I'll put it to you that way.
Gaylene, out of curiosity, you mentioned you were in Scab. Were you in Scab when they toured with Agnostic Front?
Yes,
Okay.
that was us.
Roger,
and we toured with the Bad Brains too.
Yeah, Roger from Agnostic Front told me a story about Scab on tour.
And Warzone.
Yeah. I knew Ray. You know, I knew some of that crew.
That's so cool. Hey, I still talk to Mano. She's kind of stuck in Montreal, but I don't know, maybe. Oh, these dogs are driving crazy.
Pete, I know we'll get to of Cabbages in a second, but Pete, what were you doing post Bag People musically?
What was I doing? What?
Musically, did you do much playing after your time in Bag People?
Off and on. You know, nothing. Mainly just playing with friends. I did a couple of short-lived bands, local bands in the Boston area. I sang in a madrigal group for a little while, and that was fun.
Wow.
Full costume and everything.
Wow.
And that was fun. And we played the retirement home circuit and stuff, you know.
Huh.
So that's been my career.
I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, well, we're gonna have to wait for the reunion on that one.
I see
Another
forward
band,
to
The next
that.
another
one.
band that was
Next one,
not
yeah.
recorded.
And Al, obviously, I think the viewer would know, but you ended up joining Swans, and had a pretty lengthy run in that band, a couple of different stints. I think the era that you're perhaps most connected to would be that Children of God era. But you're also on other recordings leading up to that, after that time. I did want to throw one Swans question at you because and I'll take kind of a long walk to this question, but as you know, about 20 years ago, I had been in touch with you initially for some writing I wanted to do about the band. And it was a funny time to reach out to members of Swans because there were certain people within the Swans camp that at that period of time wanted nothing to do with it. They wouldn't even discuss the band. You were not one of them, thankfully, and people like Norman were not among that category. But the band was very much put to rest at that point. We've seen in subsequent years there's been this resurrection for Swans. Certain attitudes have changed about the band. I bring this up because it really seems to me within the last 10 years, there's been this sort of final reverence given to Swans, where I think collectively a lot of people looked back and said, oh, we understand this now. We get this now. You know, there was a documentary, there was the book. Michael's had different versions of the band that have done quite well. As somebody who was in the band, particularly in that era where you were slugging it out so much, what are your thoughts on sort of the late game recognition and adoration that Swans ultimately has at this point in time?
Well, I'm happy for the band, really, the name of the band, and Michael and Norman, and the people that are still doing stuff on and off. Um, Talking about Norman and Christoph and some of these other people, but who were in it earlier on as well. So it's great that the band is getting recognition and the name has some gravitas now. Like when I was in the band, I knew that that particular thing that we were doing sound wise, because it was very sound oriented, obviously. But I knew it was changing music, but it didn't get that sort of like everything else didn't. We didn't have that acknowledgement. But I would see it in other as bands would play some years later about what that was doing to it. So I knew the importance of the band, even though it wasn't recognized as being an important band. And so I'm very lucky to be part of be would have been part of that during that time. It was really awesome. Some of that stuff that we did then, and then it became something I didn't care about more later, which was kind of me sort of leaving the band. Ended up being it took a different direction that I wasn't wanted to be part of.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know if that answers your question at all. I'm happy the band is getting, a recognition now, and it's as popular as it's way more popular than it's ever been, and so I'm happy for those guys. Absolutely.
Excellent. And Diane, Carolyn, Al, you had a second band together, late 80s, early 90s of Cabbages and Kings. I believe there were four albums with that band, if I have my info correct. And it was the three of you and different drummers. You had Vinnie Signorelli, who of course was in Swans, Ted Parsons, Rich Hutchins. And I wanted to bring that up specifically because that's
And
what
and the one we didn't do any recording with, Roy Mayorga.
Oh, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, he and I have a band in common actually, which is funny.
Oh,
Uh,
cool. You and
but
I have a band in common too, by the way. So there you go.
that's right. That's right. Yes, we do.
So you were saying yeah.
Well, that's the late 80s is when I kind of entered the picture. I wasn't old enough to attend shows, but I was reading like the EC Rocker at the time. And I remember one issue specifically, they used to have a monthly column called Banding Together, where they'd have like quarter to half page articles on various bands that were doing things in Jersey and New York. And I remember they had one issue where it was just like all like the we'll say like the New York noise bands of the era. So you open up the EC Rocker, there's of Cabbages and Kings, then you'd have other stuff like Warrior Soul, Blitz Spear. It was like all these bands were kind of hitting at once. And for me, it just seemed, maybe as an outsider as well, it was just like this explosion of all these cool bands happening at one time. That it wasn't hardcore, it wasn't necessarily what had come before, it was a different thing. So because you had experience doing Bag People, then you're kind of catching that late 80s wave. How would you compare what the scene was like at that Cabbages and Kings era versus, the earlier days when you were out there in New York?
I think it was easier to get gigs. I mean, when we did have gigs, I mean, we didn't play an awful lot because we had Diane in another city and drummers who were in other bands and stuff like that. So and that wasn't like our real focus, was it, Al, you think, to play live all the time?
No,
Anyway?
plus I was doing different bands and traveling and
Yeah,
stuff.
and I was doing Branca, and yeah, it was like, but
Yeah.
yeah, it seemed because we had at least some kind of history or something, at least we could get at least we didn't have to beg people to book us in New York at least.
So that shows you too as the Bag People influence, because it was us in Bag People that wanted to continue. It was like, well, we can't let Bag People end that way. I think Carolyn and I were talking, which is how the Cabbages and Kings thing came to fruition, which was we still wanted to play together. Some time has passed, and like, what can we do? Can we still play together? It wouldn't be under the Bag People umbrella, so it just became this other thing because we still wanted to, play together, and so that's, essentially Bag People part deux, kind of thing, in a weird way, and yeah. But as far as scene wise, I mean, New York had gotten, if you're talking about New York scene, whatever the frick that means, there was more people moving. Like the Lower East Side became, instead of this sparse like industrial,
Wasteland.
death zone, all of a sudden the hipsters came in, and it was like, all of a sudden you had this thing, and there was a bunch of, the life happened in a different way. It became a little more accessible. There was clubs popping up, a lot more people in the area, and so you had that enabled us to be, to do some stuff. Things catch up after a while to places, and so as many neighborhoods do, all of a sudden the Lower East Side became became very, very a place to hang out, as opposed to being, just for the exclusive kids in the know. It became, or the brave. It became like, de rigueur that anyone coming to town would have to go there, right? So it became this spot on the map. And as such, it had clubs, and even the old clubs like CB's and stuff. They were more open to having more bands of a different ilk play there, So it became, very fun. It had a blast.
Yeah, it was easier, I think, easier time. I think even though we're talking about that when we first came there in New York, it was pretty dire there, and it wasn't more.
Yeah.
You could, at least survive a little easier as it went into the later 80s. It wasn't so,
Well, then the entire reason to exist wasn't just survival. It was like, because in those early days, it was just trying to get home without getting killed. Essentially, whereas then once you get a foothold in an area, you become more familiar with it. Things get a little easier. You get some gainful employment. You start doing things. You get a group gaggle of friends or whatever, so that you get sort of, you're part of the fabric instead of being, trying to knock down doors and stuff, to get anything happening. So
yeah. Did Cabbages ever rehearse at Swan's place? I don't think so. Did we?
no,
I can't. Yeah, I can't remember any of that kind of
we
stuff.
would
Other
rehearse at
details.
Bob Trock's loft.
Okay, yeah, out in Brooklyn, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was, but we knew people. Yeah, it was a little nicer existence, I guess. But but as far then it was more, yeah, it was, it wasn't always about survival. It was like we could maybe actually, it wasn't just, oh, let's just blah, let's, work on some music kind of thing, a little bit more. I mean, in my opinion, it was a little more structured in a way, but not totally.
Yeah.
Well, in a way. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but it was and plus Diane being, we wanted her to sing, but it's hard when she was in Chicago, we're in New York. So the thing that would happen is, when if we had a recording thing happen, and then either Diane sort of came in down at Fun City Studios and then created vocals there, or she heard some of the stuff that we were working on and then sort of put some lyrics together there. But it was very sort of, I hate to use the word organic, then, because it's not what I mean. We didn't actually get a chance to rehearse as a unified band to then record. Usually,
Yeah.
Carolyn and I and Teddy or whoever is drumming, we would have riffs. We would actually work those things, and then Diane would come in and do voice on top of that.
Yeah. Or we'd send her tapes and stuff like that. Yeah.
If that ever happened, I know it was theoretical assemblage, but yeah. So that was the only misfortune with that particular band, is that it was a band in a very loose structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you go back and watch, someone just sent us a video of us doing a show in St. Louis after they saw the record release party.
Yeah.
And they sent us a video. And when you say like in a very loose structure, and I saw the video and I was like, oh my God, we were intense. We were very, very intense. And that didn't seem very loose to me at all after watching that video. So
no, but we had played, but that's the beauty of us, as I think we've known, we essentially played together for many years together. So even our looseness was still, we knew how to be loose together, so it was that thing. And that was with, that particular one was with Rich Hutchins.
yes, that was Rich. Yes.
Yeah. So that was really fun. Rich is really a great drummer, actually. He's really, really good.
Yeah.
And I would say, for the viewer who hasn't checked out of Cabbages and Kings, there's stuff on YouTube. I actually saw a video today of you performing at the Pyramid, I guess.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, this stuff is out there, and I would definitely recommend people check it out. Carolyn, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that you had a almost 20-year relationship with playing with Glenn Branca as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, at about like 85, 86 is when I started with Branca. So the first gig I did with him was up in Boston in Harvard. There was a gig there. And so yeah, I played with him I was on 2 albums, produced the kitchen shows when we played there for like 4 or 5 nights, whatever that was, 3 nights, I can't even remember. Went with him in Europe and was played at 100 Guitars at the World Trade Center, 2 months before it was blowed up. So yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty intense.
Carolyn got me in with Glenn for the Symphony No. 6. So it was via Carolyn that her graciousness said, "Hey, Al, there's a spot open. Why don't you go rehearse, try out?" So that was because of Carolyn that I got a chance to spend a little time with that wonderful gentleman as well. So
what was your audition? Mine was, can you double strum? Okay, you're in.
that was the audition. Sit next to him just nothing plugged in, just like, all right, double strum. Now do this. Can you just downward strum? Yeah, now just upward strum. Yeah, you're in. You're good.
Okay, yeah. Let's go have a drink. Glenn was a great drinking buddy. He was
fabulous.
He was a hilarious guy. He really
absolutely,
was.
Absolutely.
Until when he wasn't, when he hated you. But then it's
yeah, you don't want to get on that side. No.
I had Reg Bohr on a few months back. Reg Bohr.
Yeah.
He was married
Oh,
to
yeah.
several years. And one thing she had mentioned about Glenn was he was somebody who seemed to hear sound and everything. Like they'd be out for a walk and he'd hear something like a train or something, go, that's a song, or he'd hear, whatever it may be. He was always kind of thinking about what the next thing was going to be. My impression of Glenn is I haven't heard all of his output because obviously there's a lot of it, but it seems to me that whatever is on vinyl would not have compared to what was up here. Like what was up here fully never got out there, because he was kind of a moving target creatively. I mean, that was always my impression of him. Um, so I'd imagine working with him had to be an experience for a number of reasons, but an interesting character as well who plays into this story. I wanted to kind of wrap up in the here and now because I know, like I said, thankfully you're all still here, which is wonderful, and I appreciate you all joining me and for my first ever full band interview, it's been a lot of fun. What are you all doing creatively in the here and now, presently? Anything that we could share with the viewer as far as the present and possible future for any of your individual endeavors?
I'm in a band called Revolt-Chix with an X, and we're playing punk rock bowling in Vegas next month. We're super excited about it, and we've had guest guitar players on our last two albums from GBH,
Hmm.
and we've toured with them in England. We played the Rebellion Festival 3 years so far, 3 times. And so now we're getting invited to the festival in Vegas that we can't believe it, but we're going. So it's going to be amazing. I'm super excited about that. But yeah, Revolt-Chix are on Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, I think even. Yeah, check it out. We're a female fronted band. We used to be all female, but our drummer went to go have a baby in Hawaii. Yeah, things like that happen. But so Revolt-Chix,
Hmm.
check us out. We're more of like a hardcore band. I went into the hardcore direction because I just got better at playing guitar, and I realized it's more challenging to play that way. And I've even, try to learn some metal-esque songs, so it's just challenging. I just playing the guitar is a lifetime endeavor. You never stop learning it. That's why I love it so much. But yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us on here. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Al, how about you? What's keeping you busy these days?
Tons of stuff, but mostly like I'm doing a project with a visual artist. She's got two 5 foot parabolic mirrors that she signs some lights in, and I do sort of live spinning of field manipulated field recordings, but using only low frequencies. So I use a couple of V4B cabinets, and so it's just like low sound, and then it's a bunch of fog, and ideally it's about in below zero temperatures because that's when it really feels proper. So that's, but it's visually quite intense and amazing. So that's a down the road project. It's called 20F, and then and she's called Raphael Shirley is her name. And also I play with Norman and Vinny still. Like anytime those guys are in town, we blast. So that's still a very ongoing thing that we don't let go of. It's just like the fun and the and just the rapport that we have. So that's a constant thing, and hopes that one day we'll put it back on stage. Because after COVID hit, and then that sort of derailed everything as far as live life and stuff, and then people just left town. So now it's a different landscape a bit. So I'm doing that, and then I'm editing a movie I shot, and then and doing sound stuff, and so just stuff, keeping busy.
Fantastic, fantastic. Carolyn, how about you?
Well, I'm not doing much. I haven't really been playing much. My arm is really kind of messed up and it hurts to play, so I'm not really doing much that way. Um, I would like to record more at home, but I'm not really good with the tech aspect of it, so I'm not sure what's going to be happening with that. I have a really nice creative outlet. I work at the Chicago Public Library, and I've been doing some a book club called Paper, Vinyl, and Song, which is I pick an artist or and basically focus on an area of their life. Like I did Johnny Cash and focused on his album about Native Americans and all of his kind of like rebellious thing against the record industry and his juxtaposition with folk artists and his relationship with Dylan and things like that. So I would do that, play vinyl, um, have a discussion with people. We have books in the library on them. We read them, and then have people from the Old Town School of Folk Music come in and play for the audience. So I kind of really like doing the research involved in all these artists and finding out these kind of things I never knew, with especially Johnny Cash, so well known. I didn't really know anything about that kind of era. So that Billie Holiday, done Chicago blues, Joni Mitchell, things like that. Just kind of making it more accessible. I would love to do like Nick Drake or something like that, but I don't know if anyone would show up because
I would. I'll show
I
up.
know we would, right? Yeah, but so I'm kind of like trying to do that kind of walk.
Your moniker would be curator, Carolyn. I think you would say you're curating. So that's nice. It's very nice.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of where I'm at right now. But writing and stuff is always kind of in my head. But
Very cool. Pete,
Diane, yeah, whoever.
I have a band that I've been playing with called Plebroom Theatre Group.
What are they called, Pete? Sorry.
Plebroom Theatre Group.
Clubroom?
Plebroom, Plebroom.
Okay, thank you.
Group. And we've been together for about 5 years now, and we record a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff on the internet. And I play bass guitar for a couple of local outfits here in town. That's pretty much it.
How about you, Diane?
I'm not currently in a band, but I have been in a choir since 2018, and it currently is up to 60 members, which is really awesome. And we perform at the Woodstock Opera House. It's a community choir, and we do perform with a full band. So that's pretty exciting. And I also have been writing a lot of poetry. I still continue to write lyrics. I've gotten to know a lot of really great poets in the area, and actually just did a poetry event at the Woodstock Library where I read a bunch of my work, and then also had guest poets get up and do that too.
And you have a book that's published.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was part of the focus there that night. Hey, by the way, I ran into your friend Dawn at that.
The poetry thing?
Yes,
oh, cool.
Because she was standing outside the library. And anyway, we'll talk about that later.
We'll talk.
So that's currently what I'm doing. Yes, and painting, of course. I paint every day. So.
And then we have a band called Bag People.
Yes, and we have a band called Bag People. Yes.
Diane, what is the name of your book?
It is actually called A Little Comfort. It's healing poems about, I have a miniature therapy horse that I've had for many years, and I was a hospice volunteer for over 8.5 years. And I would take her to hospice centers, hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living, memory care centers, people's residences. And so it's a collection of work that I did based on some of the experiences I had doing that work. So it's very, how can I say, it's very touching. And I have photography, a lot of my own photography in there, because also at the library, I have an exhibition of photography on display right now for the entire month too.
Oh, fantastic.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, so keeping things going. Yeah.
Excellent.
Does anyone say library or is it library? I always was wondering.
Library.
You say Brary?
Mhm.
Okay. I always hear library.
Me too. I have a couple of librarian friends who
There you go.
that way all the time. And Jordan, obviously you were a big part of making this release possible. What's the rest of your
Here's
2025?
a Jordan. Here's a Jordan. Cheers, Jordan. Thank you.
Here's Jordan.
Thank you all. I mean, I'm
See
just kind of
ya.
orbiting this project. At the moment, I mean, I don't know. I'm leaving for Japan in a couple of days, just 6 weeks trip with my wife to the southernmost island, Kyushu, and going up the west coast of Honshu on the Nihonkai, the sea facing Korea, and then we'll end in Osaka and just like working and hanging out. Hopefully, seeing a Bag People show in New York. Hint, hint. Um, don't really have, I mean, I have some idea, for just kind of lazing reissues and archival stuff. I have some ideas, but there's nothing really concrete with any label or anything like that forthcoming. Not playing music really at the moment, but that could change should somebody ask or should the right circumstance present itself. But yeah, really just hanging out and working and traveling and eating and drinking.
Not too bad.
Sounds like a good plan. Well, again, I thank you all so much for making this possible. Carolyn, especially. I know we kind of kickstarted this talking about it on Messenger, as one does these days. So I really appreciate you all coming together for this. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm such a fan of this collection. I will put links up in the video description for people to check it out. I'd recommend the vinyl, folks. I know it's digital, but the vinyl is a great package. I would put it up, but my filter would destroy it. Check out the links, check out what's there, and give this band a listen. They have an important footprint in not just New York, but Chicago's history as well. I did mention to some older Chicago friends like Mr. Steve Silver that I would be doing this, and he was absolutely thrilled. Martin Atkins sends his love. There's a lot of respect for what you guys created back then in both cities. So it's a joy to
Wow.
see this record has a life in 2025, and I hope there are further shows. I hope I can get down to see one of them. So you'll have to let me know where things go from here. Paths cross again. It's been an absolute pleasure. Good health to everyone. Have a great time in Vegas, Gaylene. That sounds
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting us, Joel. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And keep me posted on what you're all doing individually. I'd love to hear from you. And if I can be of any help either through this or writing something, my door is absolutely always open to anyone here. So I hope to keep those ties together, and we'll have to do something again soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Joel. See you
Great.
all.
All right, bye.
Peace
Bye.
out, yo.